And good evening again, everybody, and welcome to Under the Bracket. Where are we? What
This
are
is
we
a
doing?
bracket rundown.
Bracket
Under the
Rundown.
radar was last night.
Under the radar bracket rundown. Okay. Welcome to Bracket Hoops HD Bracket Rundown. This is our first
First
one.
show of the year. First
I think we
bracket rundown.
we did do one briefly earlier
Oh yeah,
back in
we did.
December, I think. But
Yeah.
kind of we did a preseason one. This is our first regular season bracket rundown, where we are going to be going over our current bracket updated as of about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
We're recording this here on Thursday evening, recording right around 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, so a couple of the late games for Thursday night will not be accounted for in this bracket rundown. But the plan for this show is we're going to be showing you our bracket. We're going to be going over the teams that we believe are in there right now, having the discussions about them, and I don't know what else we're going to do.
Well, yeah, and just to remind, I mean, we don't agree on everything. This is kind of
Or
a
anything.
consensus. There are some things that we're wrong about because Chad insisted that we change it, but other than that, I think most of it's right. So,
But just go back by way of introduction again. I'm Chad Sherwood. With me is David Griggs, of course,
yeah.
everyone's
Yeah.
favorite puppet. Um, and David, what we want to do very quickly is just before we even pull up the bracket here, we want to quickly review with everybody what the bracketing rules are. I
Yes.
know people that are out there that are reading these brackets might get confused by them. Uh, it sounds like it is pretty difficult, and at times it can be, but there is probably about four or five true rules here in bracketing when you're putting teams into a bracket.
Y-
Uh,
It's really seven. Well, let's go through
Seven.
the 4 or 5. I'll get to the other two.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the first one has to do the first several actually all have to do with teams from the same conference.
Yes.
First of all, you cannot have two teams from the same conference in the same top four in the same region. So the one, two, three, four seeds in the Midwest can only have one team uh, can only be represented each by one conference each time.
Right.
Um,
So in
so
other
you,
words, like if just for instance, say
mm,
Duke Louis like Duke gets a 1 seed, Louisville gets a 2 seed, and Virginia gets a 3 seed. I think Virginia will get a better seed. What you're saying is that they can't be in the same regional. Like they wouldn't be able to meet before the Final Four. Is that what you're saying?
that's exactly what I'm saying. But it only applies to teams to the top 16 teams on the S curve, the top
Yes.
four seeds. And obviously, if you have five teams from the same conference, you then break that rule
Right.
because otherwise it becomes impossible. Um, the second rule with regard to teams from the same conference is that two teams from the same conference cannot play each other in the round of 64 ever.
Right.
They're also supposed to try to avoid it in the first four. There's a theoretical situation. We have three teams from the same conference all in the first four games. Well, you're going to have to do it, but uh, two teams from the same conference can't play each other in the round of 64. In the round of
Yes.
32, they can play each other, but only if they've only played once during the regular season, including the conference tournament.
Okay.
When you
So,
get to the Sweet 16 round, they could play each other, but they can't have played more than twice, including the conference tournament.
And again, just for clarification, so in a league like the Big East or the Big 12, where they play a true round robin,
Right.
no, there is no circumstance to where they would meet in the round of 32 ever. So if you were, when you're building your bracket, you have to watch out because if Xavier and Georgetown, for instance, were to meet in the round of 32, that's not allowed. Is that right? I believe we've lost Chad.
I thought I lost you there for a second. All right.
It was a perplexing question.
Okay. Could you repeat the question for me, David?
Okay, in leagues like the Big 12 and the Big East, where they play a true round robin, you will never see them meet in the round of 64 or the round of 32 because they automatically already play twice a year.
That's correct. And if it happens to be two teams that met a third time, normally in the conference tournament, this year there's Georgetown and Butler played each other
Yes.
early in the season, so they've already gotten three games against each other. Then you have to make certain the bracket is set up so they do not meet until the conference tournament, until a regional final at the very earliest.
And that's the Elite Eight.
Elite Eight round, correct.
Yeah.
Um, and those are the rules with regard to teams with the same conferences. A couple other rules. With regard to round of 64 matchups only, You you have to avoid a regular season rematch, a regular season non-conference rematch in that round. You also need to avoid rematches of games that were played in either of the prior 2 years tournaments, the 2013 or the 2014 tournament.
Yes, we've seen this rule broken.
It has been.
Yeah, it has been. Sometimes it just, I mean, just for the spirit of the tournament, it makes absolutely no sense to not break this rule at times. It's funny because whenever this rule is broken, all of the bracketology wannabe committee members, including us, throw a hissy fit about how the committee screwed it up, and that's why we didn't get it right. But I don't know. I'm fine with them breaking this rule within the spirit of the tournament.
Yeah, it's not that, especially when you talk about the rule of a rematch from a tournament 2 years ago. It kind of gets a little
Right.
silly. Um,
Yes.
Another rule is you cannot play at a site that you're hosting. So, for example, Syracuse cannot be in the East region. They are hosting the East region. Um,
Oh crap.
Ohio State can't play in Columbus, which is a round of 64, round of 32 site because they are the host for that school site. And in addition, even if you're not hosting it, if it is a home court of yours, you can't play on it.
Yes. Now, home court is defined very strangely here.
Yes.
It is a floor, not including conference tournaments, that you played 3 games or more on. So, for instance, like Connecticut, they play a smattering of games at the Hartford Civic Center and then the rest in stores. If they were to play 2 games or fewer in Hartford, that would not be considered a home court for them. And if Hartford were hosting games, UConn could be placed there. But if they were to play more than that, then they couldn't. We've seen this at the Wachovia Center, or whatever it was called at the time, when Villanova, who normally plays home games, didn't that particular year, so they could be placed there in their home city if they wanted to be.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. The one big exception there, obviously, with the first four, Dayton always hosts the first four. Dayton can play on their home court for the first four. That's
Right.
uh, Speaking of the first four. Another rule provides that at least one of the two first four games between the at-large teams and one of the two first four games between the 16 seeds must go to a Friday Sunday site, so you don't force a team to travel overnight and play the next day. Makes
Right.
logical sense there.
So in a sense, for the first four, you have 2 of them playing into Thursday, Saturday, and then 2 of them playing in the Friday, Sunday. Is that right?
Well, theoretically, three of them could play it, or all four of them could even play into Friday Sundays, but
Oh, okay. Yeah.
no more than one of the at large and one of the 16 games could play to a Thursday Saturday site. Uh, and I've noticed it's not in the rules, but and when I do build my brackets, I've noticed the committee is not going to send a team from Dayton very far west. They've never done it yet, so I don't think the committee would send a team from Dayton to either Portland or Seattle this year. But it's not a written rule. It's just something that kind of one of those unwritten rules. I think, just like the unwritten rule that you don't match up a MEAC versus a SWAC team in a play-in game.
Yes. Um, Other written rules, or were there any more, Chad? I can't remember.
That is it as far as the only other rule is the BYU rule.
Yes, where BYU cannot play on Sunday. That's true for all
Yeah.
championship events, not just men's basketball. Other written rules, and we'll get to this very quickly here. Duke must play in the state of North Carolina for the round of 64 and the round of 32. That was the one that I thought you might miss.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I apologize. I did miss that. One other, it's kind of a suggested rule, is that they attempt to take a team that has had to has travel out of their natural region multiple years in a row, try not to make them travel that year. Uh, and there are a few teams. I know Harvard the last couple of years has had to travel all the way across the West Coast, but
Yeah.
uh, most every time I've built a bracket so far this year, and I come across that, uh, I find myself in a situation where I might have to send Harvard out to Portland anyhow, and there's no other way to do that without moving them off a seed line. And I don't think your
Right.
committee would move them off a seed line for that, for a suggestion as opposed to a rule.
Yes, and that's the thing. One of the it's not as big of a deal for the basketball tournament as it is for some others. The NCAA does pay all of the traveling expenses, so they do want to keep teams on a bus if they can.
Right. And
Um,
a bus is under 350 miles?
yes,
Yes.
which is and it's hilarious how steadfast they are to that. Like, I mean, there's been times where it was 380 miles and they made teams fly. But it's not the worst thing in the world because most of the flights for this event are chartered. But still,
I think the team would rather fly 380
right,
miles than bus 350. So,
right, yes, okay,
so with that, I think we wanted to get into our bracket here.
yeah.
And
This isn't easy when you don't have any arms, but let's see what we can do here.
well, why don't you get that assistant that of yours to help you out here?
Yes, my assistant's an idiot. Let's see here, and I think we're going to go. Uh, Let me know if this is working.
All right. Do we have that locked in there?
We do.
Okay,
No,
wonderful. Ta-da! There it is. Selection
yes.
Sunday.
So there's the bracket. I no, I can't. I got. Can you see the entire bracket on the screen there?
Yes, I can at least. So,
Okay, I can as well. So here we go. We're just going to go down, like we're going to start with the 1 line, go all the way down to the bubble, which is in this case the 12 line. Um, and again, going right across Kentucky, Duke, Virginia, Whiskey, 1, 2, 3, 4, in that order.
okay, so just so we're clear here, Kentucky, who's the very first column, is the number one overall. Wisconsin's the number four overall. You have them next to each other because that would be a semifinal matchup.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then you have Duke and Virginia are the number two and number three overall. Those
Yeah,
little asterisks by the team designate that that's your automatic bid team.
yeah. So again, I don't think there's any. I think Duke, Virginia, and Kentucky are slam dunk number 1 seeds right now. I still like this Wisconsin team. You look at the 2 line, it's very strong as well. I don't know. Like I think you and I disagree on this Utah team, but I really like this Utah team. It's so much that I would put them on the 2. As
I,
much as it pains me to say it, because I know that Lee Delvecchio likes them as well, and I don't
I,
like him.
I would, honestly, I would probably have flip-flopped Villanova and Utah in this just because I do still think Villanova is not only probably a slightly better team, but I also think that Villanova is going to compile a better record.
Yeah,
I think they're going to run through the Big East, which is not as tough of a conference as the Pac-12, although the Pac-12 is pretty weak this year too. So,
yeah.
but they
So
don't have that Arizona sitting there staring at them
yeah.
like
Now, Gonzaga is very very good, but when you look at their profile, they don't have the strong win that you typically see, like on the 1 or 2 line, like the big monster win. They almost had one when they went out to Arizona and nearly beat them, but I still think you're going to see them seated very high.
I think I honestly don't know where Gonzaga loses another game this year. First of all, including
Right,
the
I don't
conference
either.
tournament, they do have a non-conference game left, but it's only against Memphis.
Yes.
So I honestly could see Gonzaga getting up to the 1 line. It obviously is going to require Wisconsin, Kentucky. I'm sorry, Wisconsin, Duke, or Virginia to slip up a little bit, get a couple of losses. But if everybody else has 2 losses and Gonzaga has 1, I see them at a 1 seed.
Yeah, I mean they very could easily be a 1 seed. I mean they are that good. So moving on down, and this Louisville team, they don't have the wins yet. And again, just another reminder is we're doing it as if the season ended today. We're not really forecasting. We're going strictly off the data. That includes, by the way, the human polls. The reason it includes that is because the committee does look at the rankings, and they also look at what's called the NABC rankings. What that is, it's one coach from each conference that submits a top 15 ranking to the committee of the teams in their geographic region. So even if a team their RPI might not be that strong, or they might not have enough quality wins, if all of those coaches continue to vote them high and there's interviews, they could still overcome that and get a very good seed anyway. So again, Louisville, no huge wins yet, but still ranked very high. That's why I think they would land on the 2 line right now.
All right. Looking at your 3 line here, David, Maryland, despite the loss last night, still getting in here to 3 seed. A road loss at Illinois. I don't think that's a killer loss by any means.
No,
think it meant a lot more for Illinois than it did for Maryland, honestly.
I do as
But
well.
um, I mean, I was a little bit hesitant about it at first, but then I looked at the 4 seeds and I said, well, who would I move up to replace them? And I don't see anybody there that I would.
Right, and again, Oklahoma on this line, Kansas on this line. The fours, good teams, but again, I think you're lacking some merit here, and I know that's kind of going against what I just said about the rankings. Notre Dame, they had a real nice win at North Carolina. Iowa State, no real big wins yet, not quite that Maryland has. Wichita State really doesn't either. VCU doesn't either. I mean, they have decent wins, but they don't have those huge caliber wins away from home that you typically see the ones and the twos and a lot of the threes get. So I think the merit in the paper is starting to taper off here once you get, especially past this four line here.
Well, I mean, VCU, I agree with you that VCU does not have the marquee wins, but I mean, their losses were to Villanova, who's ahead of them on this Virginia, who's on the 1 seed line, and Old
Yeah.
Dominion that only has one loss on the season. And those are
Right.
your three losses. Meanwhile, they've beaten Northern Iowa, they've beaten Cincinnati, they've beaten Oregon, Tennessee,
Yeah.
Toledo, Davidson. Uh, I just really am high on this VCU team, and I would not be surprised to see them move higher and higher on this bracket because I really think they can run through the A10 this season.
Yeah, they certainly can. And I mean, they had a really nice win last night. I mean, it was at home, but they beat good Davidson last night. Um,
What would that be?
well, I mean, that's a quality win. Good Davidson's a good team.
If there was such a team.
Well, anyway, moving
We'll
on.
get to this in a minute here.
Yeah. So So on the five line, we have here North Carolina, Stanford, who I was surprised to have them this high, Arkansas, who I have not really been in favor of, but Arkansas is doing things that they haven't done in the last decade, and that's win away from home. Georgia is not a great team. They're probably not even a tournament team, but they were unbeaten at home going into that game last night, and Arkansas got them. They're going to get credit for that, excuse me, Georgia probably isn't a tournament team just because of how good Georgia's been at home this year. Uh, that probably looks too high. I think it's too high. But then when you look at the six, who do you move up instead?
Well, and that's the big question. Every time I look at one of these teams and say this is too high for them, I look down at the next line and say, well, none of those teams are any better than them. And this Arkansas team, that win at Georgia, they now have 2 road wins already. The other one against an SMU team that is looking like an NIT team, but it is a decent team. Now I know Joby's has talked about how. And you're back, David.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Joby's talked about how that was virtually a home game for Arkansas. They have a ton of fans in the Dallas area there with the SMU
Right.
game, but this was not a home game in Georgia for Arkansas by any means.
It wasn't, and I mean, it was still a very partisan SMU crowd. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't the SMU of old that we're kind of used to seeing. It was still a pretty good win, and again, it's more noticeable now. They've played 3 road games. They won 2 of them, and the 2 teams they beat, uh, SMU, Georgia, probably not tournament teams, but those are not easy places to go and win. And again, when you compare it to the teams we have below them here, who do you take out instead?
Exactly. Um,
Okay.
so now, if we move on, look at these teams in the 5 line. I noticed you did put Ohio State there. Ohio State finally getting wins of note, having beaten both Illinois at home and one at Minnesota. Those 2 wins being their 2 best wins of the season by far.
Yes. Where's my assistant? Where is my assistant?
And we are still looking here. I know that Ohio State was there. I do not. I think you had GW on this line as well.
Yeah. Hey, come on, let's go. Jeez. You just can't get good help around here. The
All right.
people. Gee whiz.
There we go. Wait, we got
Okay.
something going on here.
It's about time.
All right, here we go. Yeah, on the 5 line. I'm sorry, we're talking about the 6 line here.
Yes.
GW. Do you think you're a little high there on GW, David? Even.
Well, they had those 3 big wins. I mean, again, to beat Wichita on a neutral floor and to have the kind of the bloated record, when you're looking at them, I just couldn't justify putting them behind Wichita right now. And I
Right.
realize this is something we kind of discussed a lot. If you're asking if I think this is where they'll end up, I can kind of see that that's breaking a conference rule there. Going up against good Dave. We'll get to that in a minute, but I don't know. Like we said earlier, sometimes they do make exceptions. But back to George Washington here. I just think that like with that bloated record, with the wins away from home, albeit not necessarily true road games, and then with the one being against Wichita, When I look at the 7, I see teams that honestly I think are better than GW that I think will end up ahead of them. But right now, I just think George Washington's done a little bit more on paper. Like when you look at West Virginia, I think we all think they're good, but what have they done?
Well, I mean, I really like this one. I like, I mean, three out of those four teams on the seven line, Seton Hall, Baylor, West Virginia, all really good,
Yeah, but
really good
Seton,
teams.
I like Seton Hall a lot too, but they need to do something away from home.
They do need to do something away from home. West Virginia does not have as many good wins yet. They're going to have tons of chances in the Big 12 pretty much every night. So,
Yes.
and Baylor, I mean, Baylor's been a surprise to me all season. Now they're out to an 0-2 start in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Luckily, they get TCU this weekend, so they'll finally get their first conference win.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, so that's the 7, and then the 8 and the 9s. Illinois. This was a team we were really big on coming into the year. They've been kind of disappointing, but I think they're kind of trending back now. I like them a lot.
With that win over Maryland, especially,
Yeah,
yes.
big win over Maryland, and I think you're going to see them very safely inside the bubble. I think you're going to see them a few lines higher than the 8 when it's all said and done. San Diego State was a team we were really big on coming into the year as well, and now we're not big on them at all anymore because, quite frankly, this is. I mean, they're still a good team. I just think that they've been a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, they may end up lower than this. I think they're a team that I'm selling on right now, not
Yeah.
buying. But
Iowa, a little schizophrenic. Big win at North Carolina. They had another big win as well, or decent win against Nebraska. They've got a few, but they don't really pass the smell test all of the time. They have a high ceiling, but they don't always play up to it. So, again, that's one of the characteristics of an 8 seed. And Joby and I talked a lot about this team the other night. What about Temple? This is a team that I did not think was going to be good at all this year. They were atrocious last year. You and I watched that game against Louisiana Tech. I believe that was opening night or opening weekend or very early on.
opening weekend, November 17th, yeah.
Yeah, and our opinion of that game was that La Tech just blew it against a really, really weak team. Temple's not weak at all.
Well, Temple after that game went out, got blown out by Duke,
Yeah.
lost by 7 to Vegas, and we thought they were. Then after getting wins over Penn and Brooklyn and LIU Brooklyn, they lost by 2 to St. Joe's, and we were done with them at that point.
Yeah, we really were. But
And then they beat Kansas. They won at UConn. They won at Tulane, which only Lido Vecchio is the only thing that Tulane is any good, but it was still a
road win against a team that's played really well at home this year.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think they're too high on the 8 line at all. And honestly,
they're playing as good as anybody in the country right now. The last month.
And there's nobody in that league, including and especially Memphis, who's looking really bad right now. If you want to see a team not play well, but yeah, I think they deserve it. I don't think there's anybody in the American that's looked nearly as good as they have. So on to the Big East line here.
Now I see you have this Providence team in here. I think you like them a little better than I do. I know they did just beat Butler the other night, who was also on the same exact line.
Yeah.
I mean, they beat Notre Dame, but I guess they're as good as anybody else below them. So.
Well, here's the thing about Providence. You can make a case. It's almost like what we've been doing. You look at what have they done that's good, and it's pretty good. They won at Butler. They beat a Notre Dame team that I believe they're the only team that's beaten Notre Dame. Did both of that away from home. Beat a pretty decent Rhode Island team. Beat a pretty good Miami, Florida team, albeit they're still low in the RPI. Beat Creighton. But then you look at some of the bad things they've done, and it is as bad as that is good. Losing to Brown at home is the Surgeon General typically does not advises against it, and losing to Boston College, another just really bad loss. So I had a hard time placing them. I could see putting them lower. I could even see a case that they belong higher up on the list than that.
Let's mention the St. John's team here. I mean, they got up into the top 25. Everyone was talking about this team. They got off to, I think, was an 11-1 start there.
Yeah, the Johnnies played really well.
Now 0-3 in conference play now.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it is a tough league, but I mean, it isn't that it's just that when they played 3 games of that caliber, you can't expect them to win them all, but you can expect them to win a few. They
Right.
didn't
Well,
win
I think
any.
that they were shorthanded for the Seton Hall and the Butler game,
Yeah.
and they were in the Villanova game until not long after half. They ended up losing by 18, but
Yeah,
it was not that bad.
that was a fun game to watch for about 30 minutes of play. So,
Well, any game that Gus Johnson is calling is a fun game to watch, but that's
yeah. How about now? We need to talk about a team. I don't know if it's the Atlantic 10. We've discussed this. Joby and I discussed this the other night. Lee Del Vecchio's all over it. The Atlantic 10, I think it's always overlooked. I think it's partly due to their really bad television deal. Even if you live in those cities, which you do, you still can't see the games without a premium sports package.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I live. I mean, where I live. I'm in the Philadelphia television market. I'm not. I'm about an hour from Philadelphia, but uh, I can barely see half the games involving Temple, Villanova, St. Joe's, all the Big Five schools. They just, especially the ones that are in the A10 there. I don't know that I've had more than one or two LaSalle games on TV all year so far,
yeah,
uh, and it's just that the only games you get are the ones that are in the national package. Um,
right,
and the national package isn't that good for the A10.
right.
They probably got to get back with ESPN if they really want to
Yeah. Now,
go back with it.
what their deal is, it is with CBS Sports,
And
NBC
NBC,
Sports, ESPN. I think has a smattering of games, and then
right?
is it Masson? It's this new. It's SNY. Yeah, SNY, which is not available without a satellite dish outside of the New York area, and other than Fordham, who you and Lee like for some reason, there aren't any teams there. So it is very underexposed. And another kicker about this television deal is, first of all, it's $5 million that the 15 teams split evenly. That comes out to a very low $330,000 per school. To give you an idea, that's about half of what the Missouri Valley gets. Even though I think we would agree the Atlantic 10 is at least as good, probably most of the time better than the Missouri Valley. And there's a stipulation that they are not allowed to play conference games on free to air television. So, what that means is if NBC Sports, which is not a basic cable tier channel, is showing a game between Dayton and, I don't know, George Washington, the local NBC station is not allowed to show the game.
Right.
The only exception to that was the conference championship game, which was on CBS, and the only
Still is.
reason, yeah, and the only reason that happened, ESPN had the rights to it, but sold it to CBS. So what you end up having here is a very underexposed league. It's not talked about, and I don't think people realize how good this league is, at least at the top. This Dayton team is really good. They were in the Elite Eight last year, for crying out loud. They've had a lot of setbacks. I mean, they've had a player dismissed for discipline reasons. They've had injuries. They've had trouble getting players qualified. But even with such a depleted roster, with a weak front court, they're going out and they're still playing hard. I like them on this 9 line. They went into St. Bonaventure, which is kind of a tough place to play, and waxed them tonight.
Oh, St. Bonaventure lost to Delaware, so
Well,
I don't.
so did,
I would. We've only been talking about that game seriously if they had lost it. So,
yeah,
uh, but but I agree with you. This Dayton team has really impressed me. There's nobody on this team taller than 6'6", and yet they're still
yeah,
winning games.
right. And
Um,
again, I mean, if they get to the NCAA tournament, I don't expect them very far to go very far in it. But still, that's as good of a coaching job as last year to do it with such a weak front court and a depleted roster. Yeah.
I
Anyway,
guess on the 10 line, we kind of continue the Big East tradition here with both Georgetown and Syracuse, right?
yeah. So I mean, two Big East rivals there. It's a shame we couldn't match them up. Georgetown and West Virginia, God, that would be a fun one. A
Yeah.
little old conference rivalry there. Um, and again, Washington. And what do you think of this Colorado State team? I
All right,
think you,
let's do that first. Yeah, I still like them a lot. I know they did lose to Wyoming, but that's a huge
yeah,
rivalry game. I'm not, uh, and I do think this is a pretty good Wyoming team, very under the radar, especially for even though they're in a Mountain West conference there. Uh,
Yeah,
I'm still high on this Colorado State team. I really, I mean, I guess they're now 1-2 in conference play, right?
yeah. And again, and Wyoming still has it within their reach to get into the tournament. That was a really impressive win last night. And again, it's one of those teams that might go in. The 11 line we have kind of a
Let's go back a second here.
all right.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a pass here, David, because I know you started build this bracket. We started building just this evening before some games went final. But LSU there on the 10 line
I
Went to Missouri tonight and did something that the Surgeon General also does not recommend.
They lost. I actually moved them down from 8 to 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, after that it
Yeah,
happened.
I mean, they did win at West Virginia. You got to give them a ton of credit for that. So.
Right. And let's see, the 11, the Loyola Ramblers. Now, this one's going to surprise a lot of people, but again, look at the teams below them. I just like what they've done. They won a huge game on the road last night against a team that won't lose many at home, Evansville. They have a pretty bloated record. The one thing they're lacking is really, really big wins, but overall, I think they've done pretty well.
Well, I mean, I got to give them a little bit of credit. They went out to Vegas in a neutral court, beat Texas Tech and Boise State.
Yeah, and
NIT caliber teams, not NCAA caliber teams, but to do
yeah,
that against two fairly large programs, they beat a decent Kent State team on the road. Again, not NCAA caliber, and they're gonna have three more really big chances with Wichita State twice, including a huge game at home against them this weekend, and another game against Northern Iowa coming up in February.
right. So again, they have the chances to certainly stay inside the bubble, maybe get a little bit higher. I like this Oklahoma State team a lot. I think they're way better than this 11 seed. But again, going off of what we've seen so far, they don't have the big wins yet. They almost had one last night, but I think they're going to play their way up higher.
They actually impressed me in the loss last night more than
Yeah,
anything, because I didn't really believe in them until I saw how well they played last night.
right. This Xavier team, again, they are home court heroes to the teeth. And what do you do with a team like that? Ultimately, some of their wins are impressive. They beat Georgetown handily at home. They beat Seton Hall handily at home. Both those teams were in the rankings, but they've done absolutely nothing away from home. They beat San Diego. I believe that's all they've done away from home. And their wins at home indicate that they should be higher, but if they don't do more on the road than what they've done, they went to DePaul and lost. If they don't win at least one or two road games in conference, they might not even get an 11 seed. They might not get in at all.
Right?
You have to win on the road.
They're probably going to have to win on the road. I mean, we have seen, especially since the tournament went to 68, that maybe a team that doesn't win at all on the road can sneak in there first
Yeah,
four. But
like Xavier did last year.
yeah, like Xavier did last year.
Yeah.
Um,
And
now,
out of the Atlantic 10 here, we have. I
this
mean,
is now everybody that listened to our introduction heard that you cannot have two teams from the same conference play each other in the round of 64.
but this
George
is
Washington could not play Davidson. However,
well, it's good.
Davidson stinks. I'm
They
sorry.
do not. I mean, this is a team. They've won 11 games. They went into Virginia and almost won. They went into VCU. Stayed with them last night. I mean, I think Davidson good. And again, Chad thinks they stink. I insist on referring to them as good Davidson. The rest.
Let me run down Davidson's. It's not 11. It's only 10 victories. Catholic,
You're not counting the exhibition games.
Campbell,
You're already under cheating.
Central Florida, UNC Wilmington, Charlotte, Stetson,
That was a good
Montana,
rivalry.
Niagara, College of Charleston, and Richmond. That isn't even close to a quality win at all. Their best win is they won at UCF.
Well, they went into Virginia and played pretty well.
Uh, did they win the game?
They played pretty well. Anyway, on to the 12 line.
Well, you know what?
Uh,
When it comes down to it, what Davidson did versus Virginia versus what Harvard did against Virginia, it's going to look the same. It's a loss at Virginia.
Well, anyway, there they are at the 11. Moving on to the 12.
No, I am pausing
Chad, what are
this.
you
I'm
doing?
not going any
Chad, what are you
further
doing?
until that
Chad,
becomes bad Davidson. We're going to retype this.
Chad,
Delete, delete, delete. All right.
Chad, what are you doing?
Cincinnati. There we go.
What's Cincinnati done?
What
Look
Cincinnati
how
has
good
done.
Davidson.
I don't know what Cincinnati's done. No, Cincinnati. Actually, Cincinnati's sitting here at 11-3. They have won at NC State. They've beaten SMU. They've beaten San Diego State. They've done a lot more than Davidson. So if anybody's out there is even thinking Davidson's a tournament team, you got to have Cincinnati in before them. And I think we lost David. He is on mute.
Anyway, you can't
Welcome
just
back.
make arbitrary changes like that.
Yeah, you got vetoed on that one. Now, if Davidson had won last night, I'll give you this. If they'd beaten VCU last night, different story. We might be talking about them tonight, but no.
Well, they almost beat BC.
This Davidson team has a bloated record, and I think it's going to turn into a just a few games over 500 record by the end of the season.
Okay. Anyway, to give you an idea here of how it worked out, Green Bay on our 12 line is actually sandwiched in between Indiana and UConn, which is the last two teams in, and BYU and Michigan State. So the S curve reads BYU, Michigan State, Green Bay, and then Indiana and UConn. But because of the first four, the at-larges have to play each other.
Right. Michigan State picked up a nice win tonight over Iowa.
Yeah.
I think that's enough that they've starting to make up for that Texas Southern loss.
Right, and
We
with
have to
that,
mention every podcast for the rest of the season. So
right, and honestly, with that, we would probably swap them if we could with Cincinnati. We might actually be able to go ahead and do that if we're not breaking any rules.
I think we would be okay by doing that.
Yeah. So,
No,
like,
no, we wouldn't because Michigan State and Maryland are in the same conference. We all forget that. But
yeah. Well, do they play?
we're going to give you half a second here. We're going to double check how many times they play each other this season.
Because
Michigan State and Maryland are scheduled to play each other twice this season, so that would not be permissible.
okay, like we might have to move. We could do this. I think we could do. Well, this is why we build it ahead of time so we can avoid this.
Well, we're going to leave it like this for now. I think that might be our pick.
Okay. Well, I think I got a solution here. We got. Again, this is really hard without arms.
You can't put Michigan State against Ohio State in the
Yeah, you can't. Okay.
That's pretty.
Yeah, you're right. So that would not work. So we're just going to leave it as is for now.
And you know what? We have another problem here, David.
What's that?
I just noticed that we did this, and we already broke rule here. You have Northern Iowa and Loyola playing each other in the round of 64 on the 6-11 line there.
I do not. That is just not true.
You could put Michigan State there. I think we'd be okay.
Okay, Michigan.
And then put Loyola over where Cincinnati is, and we'll move Cincinnati against BYU, and we'll be good to go.
Okay, so Michigan State goes here. See, and again, this was all pre-planned.
Yeah. So, see, we made these errors so people could catch us and
right. And again, and it's a teaching tool because you can kind of see how changes are made.
And every now and then that happens, especially with the conference that might only have two teams in, that you just kind of forget that you got to be checking them. You're thinking, I got to check the Big Ten, the ACC, and you don't realize I got to check the MVC because I put three of their teams in too.
So there it is with that. But and Chad has this fancy software that tells him when he's making a mistake. I don't have that. I don't even have any arms or feet.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So that's it. Like as far as the teams inside the bubble, 13 through 16, those are our under the radar teams. You can catch our podcast. We went through all of those conferences last night. I don't know if there's anything else that we wanted to point out from the 13 line down. We really like this Buffalo team. We think that they might be able to play their way inside the bubble, so we might be seeing them. Is there anybody else down there?
I just lost. Okay, let's see here. The 13 line down, we're talking about. I mean, SFA is on the 12 line there. They're a team that, if they win out to the conference championship game, is going to be in the discussion. I don't think they're going to quite be there.
And technically, albeit barely, Green Bay is inside our bubble. SFA is not.
Just wanted to point out here with this I was just trying to check on a score here. I know Georgia State was struggling with Louisiana Lafayette tonight, and they're actually down 3 with 7 seconds left.
Georgia
Uh,
State is struggling with
they're,
life. Georgia,
and after losing at home to Texas State, they're about to lose on the road to Louisiana Lafayette, and just there's a team that's just falling apart right now.
since when did not sucking become such a problem for what looked to be a very good team? Uh, this is a team that coming into the year we thought would be inside the bubble, but wow.
And then then they blew out Green Bay at home, and we put them in. We said, "You're okay. You're a tournament team. Let's move on." And
Right.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just not looking good right now.
So who on the
They,
14 are we going to swap them with since they've already played Iowa State this year?
uh,
We're just full of errors tonight.
I'm probably looking at swapping them with Wofford as the team that I like
I
on the
think so.
14 line.
Let's get that done here.
I don't quite have a final yet on that game tonight, but I'm assuming they're going to.
Either way, they can't be. So we got Georgia State.
And the other team that I think could actually play their way into the bubble if they did not need if they needed an at-large bid would be Harvard.
Yeah.
But now there is no way. Now, if Harvard loses enough games that they need an at-large bid, and they're not going to at least tie for the conference championship, they're not going to be in the bubble discussion anymore. So,
Right.
well, I like this Harvard team a lot. They don't have to worry about an at-large bid.
Correct. But
That's because obviously the Ivy League does not have a conference tournament.
Mm-hmm. So again, it's just been a comedy of errors tonight. But
The only other team that seems to be missing here is I do not see NJIT in the bracket.
there are, yeah, they are just outside the bubble. Teams that we looked at but didn't take were Wyoming. Yes. You could make a very strong case for them. In fact, you know, them and Cincinnati, they've probably done a little more than Cincinnati. But you know, that's a pretty good team to watch for. Other than that, it's just this drastic drop off. It's teams from big conferences with bloated records that have done nothing away from home. You know, Georgia, Georgia Tech, SMU, which is not a power conference, and I don't know. The bubble is always weak. There's always reasons to take a team or leave them out, but geez, it's exceptionally weak this year, it seems.
Yeah, why don't you run? You ran through a couple of them. What was the rest of the? Do we have the rest of the bubble there?
Yeah, let me see. It's I gotta get it up here.
If not, I can try to see if we can't pull it up on my end here. But I'm having some computer problems. I think on both ends right now.
Yeah. Did I? Oh wait, that's the wrong. Okay, here we go. Yeah, computer issue. Here we go.
Good TV here.
All right, yeah, this is great. So UTEP, a team that's out there, Miami, Penn State, who you could make sort of a case for them, Georgia, Oregon. If Oregon gets the win tonight, like that could easily ended up putting them in. Florida, who just continues to crash into the mountain. SMU, who crashed before the season started. Georgia Tech, Alabama was the last team I looked at.
Alabama. NC State and UNLV, I see, we're kind of in our bubble discussions here as well.
Yeah.
This Vegas team, I think in the end they're going to have one really good win, but that might be it. So that's why I don't know that they're there yet.
Yeah, and it is a really good win.
It may be the only team that beats Arizona this year, but
right. So
I guess with that, anything else that we missed here?
No. So it's an ever-changing process. And again, next week we'll try and get the bracketing rules right, but that's where we stand. And again, each week we do this. It's just where we think the teams currently stand. It's a checkpoint. It's not a forecast. So, you know, take us out of there, and you just continue to enjoy this eye-gouging game between Memphis and SMU.
All right. And with that, yeah, we've got a couple of eye-gouging games on right now, honestly.
Yes. Lots of games tonight, but no good ones.
Another, but yeah, there might be a coaching change in UCLA before the end of the season if this keeps up.
Yes. All right.
With that, wish everyone a good night. We'll be back Sunday with a bracket racket, I believe, and a couple more podcasts again next week.